Real sharp. The donating will watch them right away.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get started.
And they did.
We may have a few more people joining us. Today is April 5th, and this is a meeting of the Kendall County Bernie Fair Oaks Transportation Study Committee, Fair Oaks Ranch, excuse me. We've got several items on our agenda today, but the most important item is to go through some more of those committee source projects. But before we do that, I'd like to ask if any committee members have any opening remarks. Northern, we'll start over there with you today. No? Marcus? Nope. Bitsy?
No.
Yeah, I just have one. You know, the last couple meetings we've had a lot of discussions about eminent domain and the thoroughfare plan process. And I sent a note to Jeff. Some of you may have that process documented. I could not locate it. I looked all over the place, but and I asked Jeff if he wouldn't mind getting that for us as a committee so we can actually look at the process and see how it spells out, you know, the conditions on which the thoroughfare plan will be executed. So I just want to let everybody know that that's in the works, and I think that'll help our discussion and when we get to that point.
Okay.
So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Dale. Bob?
Well, thoughts related generally along the same line. You know, we didn't come to a consensus last time. We never took a vote, but it didn't appear that there was any way to wrap our minds around the topic. And I no doubt we're going to talk about it again today, and we're going to hear from some people again today. That's good. It seems to me, just from watching and listening, that one suggestion I have that might let us gain consensus is to craft recommendations that say we as a citizens committee fully recognize the authority of our sponsoring government agencies to exercise eminent domain as they see fit, because we have no say in the matter whatsoever. We can't make them use it. We can't make them not use it. We're irrelevant in that ultimate decision. But having said that, the consensus of this committee on each and every greenfield project is that we oppose the use of eminent domain to do that. And just let that ambiguity go, because we're never going to resolve it. And the emails and phone calls that have taken place in the last week are all very well stated. They're very, very passionate. But we've got to come to a consensus and move on, or we're never going to get through. That's my thoughts.
Gary, anything?
Well, not to belabor this point, but to belabor the point, are we planning to put a general discussion of eminent domain on the agenda at some future meeting once we have a drafted policy to beat up on? Because I'd hate for it to just continue to come in and out, and to a certain degree we're violating the premise of transparency by having all these emails and phone calls going back and forth, and there's a lot of discussion outside the public view of the contemplation of how that's evolving. So I'm hoping that we at least have an open discussion about eminent domain, but I think we need the document first to be able to do that.
As the chief turkey herder, my recollection of where we left that was that we had some language drafted that was more or less okay, but it needed some refinement. And a committee comprised of Mr. Banwolf and Ben Eldridge, and I think Seth Mitchell was on that. Bitsy was on that.
Joan has been involved.
Yeah. And y'all were going to take that. They were going to take that language and either completely redo it or offer some replacement language that would find its way into a report that related the interaction between the major thoroughfare plan in particular and the use of eminent domain. And I believe that we're still on track to do that. I think it's important that the committee establish a position that reflects the values of the community with respect to eminent domain.
Good, thank you.
So I think we'll do it, but it's going to take a little while to get there.
I appreciate the conversation about this. I've come to believe that this discussion about eminent domain is probably one of the most important things that we're going to discuss as a committee. I think that's loud. I think the projects that we choose to support and not support are going to be dramatically, at least for me personally, dramatically impacted by my sense of whether or not they're going to be built by the developer when the property develops through the thoroughfare process or potentially in some other way. I would recommend we consider tabling Greenfield Road projects until the eminent domain conversation is completed, because I'm not going to know how to vote on those projects until that is settled in some way. I'm not making a motion, but I'm just making a recommendation that we might consider that. It's going to be really, really strange to think about a road through someone's property. Is that a someday when a developer develops it, maybe, or bulldozers lining up and moving them out of their house? I sent an email to the committee last week. I've been traveling the whole since the last meeting. Just got back in town last night. But one of my recommendations was that I think it's in our best interest to be redundant for the sake of clarity. I think burying a statement about a policy for eminent domain in a different part of a document could very easily be overlooked by somebody who just opens up the document, flips to the projects, and sees these nice maps, and, oh, I like that one, and runs with it. So my recommendation, I had some language that I just thought up, and I'm open to it being modified, but
John, let me.
We can want to hold this for the discussion.
Let's hold that for now.
Okay.
We're just in opening comments. I want to kind of get around the room, but I hope maybe Mr. Banwolf and his comments will illuminate us as to whether
That's perfect.
we're going to talk about it today.
I doubt I can ever offer any illumination to anyone. I'll do my best, Mr. Chairman. Oh, now.
Yeah, now.
Well, see, there you go. I told you I couldn't do very well illuminating anyone. Our group met, I think, about a month ago, right before spring break. And again, to remind everybody, Bitsy, myself, Dell was there also. Jeff Carroll couldn't make that one, but Jeff's been a part of this. Jonah was there. Seth Mitchell was there. And Ben Eldridge was there. And so they provided their comments to sort of my first cut, if you will, at what you had sent us earlier. And I suspect that by this time next week, I'll have the revised draft to circulate to that group. And by the time we convene in 2 weeks, there should be a revised red line draft in the packet.
Okay.
So it's moving along at a matter of speed.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments?
That's it.
All right. Good to have you back. Mr. Kite?
We're going to get into eminent domain as part of the agenda, aren't we?
Well, it's possible. I mean, it's on the agenda, and I didn't know whether.
Well, the only comment I was going to make is, I know that right now they're concerned about greenfield type projects, which is, I mean, any common sense would be if you're going to have new transportation corridors, you're not going to route them through neighborhoods, developed neighborhoods. So you're going to look for open areas.
Yeah.
Which is what I think a lot of them are thinking about. But they need to understand that I know Jonah and Ben handed out a page with roundabouts. Well, I don't know if you realize that almost every one of those roundabouts is going to require eminent domain. So when we talk about eminent domain, it's not just new greenfield projects. It's these others. The last one we talked about, the last meeting, was going from Bentwood up the creek and across the Dowdy's property. Well, that's all eminent domain. They're not going to jump and say, here, take it for free. So we need to understand what we're talking about. But a lot of these projects that have been supported You know, Bitsy, you've been wanting sidewalks on School Street. That's all eminent domain, because there's no room for sidewalks on School Street. So we need to realize what we're talking about when we're fighting eminent domain. So that's the comments. You know, a lot of these things that everybody's been very supportive of, they don't realize they're talking about eminent domain to do it.
Bryce?
I think Dale's recommendation about receiving information and being informed before we're diving off into some of this stuff is a great idea. I love being informed. So yay, that's my comment.
I think that is a good idea. You know, and I want to, I guess, begin the process here of managing expectations. I think when we started this process, gosh, it was almost 3 years ago, seems like, there was a hope and maybe an intention that we would come up with something that would dramatically improve transportation and mobility in this community. And over the course of our work here, and my hearing the sentiments of the community and listening to the people that have expertise on this committee about transportation planning, and then listening to what is going on in the county, school districts.
And then the others.
You know, the fact of the matter is that if we want to seriously impact mobility in this community, it's going to take a major project, probably a project that would cost more than we would be able to afford, and it would involve somebody outside this community, an agency like maybe TxDOT. And I don't think that there's an appetite for that at this point. So I think that we're going to wind up coming up with a very pragmatic, very practical list of projects that will make an improvement to our mobility, that may address some hot spots in the community, and hopefully will relieve people's frustrations a little bit. And my hope is that the way those projects are selected and implemented, that they will allow the political subdivisions, the cities and the county, to gain the credibility that they need to pursue larger programs. So all of that is to say, as we go through these list of a lot of projects, keep in mind that at some point we're going to get down, we're going to say there's 50 projects here that we've said are worthy of considering. Now I'm going to ask you to vote, what are your top 3 priorities, your top 5 priorities? And we pick those, and then we're probably going to say that's probably what we can afford to do. I mean, that's the reality of the situation, short of some other big grandiose plan. So as we get into these discussions that we're trying to just tweak all around the edges and get it exactly right, keep that in mind, because we do have some urgency to get through with this, as Dale noted. So just let that temper your desire to find a perfect solution, and let it help us find some good solutions. That's my only comments. Next item is to approve the minutes of March the 29th. Did we get those on the 15th yet, Erica? Okay, I didn't get them. Okay, we'll do 15th next week, or next time we meet. So need a motion for approval of minutes of March 29th.
Make a motion.
Second.
Anybody have any other objection to adopting those by consensus?
We are at.
No, we did not. They weren't available last time. Okay, hearing no objections, the minutes of March the 29th are approved. Okay, first opportunity for public comment. We have an opportunity for the public to comment at the beginning and end of our meetings. And so we'd ask if you'd like to make a comment relative to our deliberations here today or this process, please come forward. Give us your name, and please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. If you run out of time, we'll let you finish up at the end. Mr. Kyle?
Lance Kyle, 226 Cascade Caverns Road. That's in the Bernie ETJ. Good afternoon, Chairman Manning and Durden and committee members. I think you all recall that in 2018, people were fed up with forced annexations, and the governor outlawed them that year. People in 2018, and I think Jonah's referenced this a few times, people in 2018 were fed up with the gateway and the implied eminent domain in that situation. There were at least 4 meetings with 300 or 400 people each, a great proxy for thousands of people that opposed the gateway. Eminent domain is not popular, and of course almost everybody in here, is in favor of the public good, the public welfare, sure. But you always look beneath the surface 80% of the time or 90% of the time with these quote-unquote, public welfare, eminent domain actions and practices, and some developer, some builder is benefiting more than anybody. So I'm glad thank you, committee, for being judicious. Thank you for trying to craft language that does not endorse eminent domain. And like so many have said on this panel, the city can do what it wants. The city likes force. I'm sorry. The truth hurts. We all know it's true. The county commission, Don, you guys get a lot of criticism. It's not a lot of it's not merited. My experience with the county commission is mostly favorable. They actually listen to people. But the council it has a plan. It's got a 1,000-year plan, and it's not going to deviate. And it's just like a blunt, as the British say, it's a blunt instrument. But we need a vehicle to echo the sentiments of the public, and this is the vehicle. We've got too many advisory boards and committees and commissions in this city that just don't listen to the people. And please do not endorse eminent domain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kyle. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
I'm Bill Kennan. I'm the great-great-grandson of Ferdinand Herff, and I picked up the Bernie Star to see our South Pasture mentioned, and this is the connecting road that's been on the map for quite some time. I had no complaints with Bernie drawing lines through there. I thought it was a good idea. If a piece of property gets developed, make the developer build the road so the city doesn't have to pay for it. But what happens when you, I'll say this, Texans cherish their property rights even more than the right to bear arms. And that's why you see such an uprising when the federal government or any government entity starts taking land away from private citizens, especially to benefit private developers. And when Esperanza came to Bernie and said, we want to double the size of Bernie, put 10,000 more people here, we warned, lots of the citizens warned that we could not support this big a community without roads, sewers, water. They said, well, we'll get our water from Canyon Lake. Oh, and we'll widen the Herff Road for you. But they didn't look at other alternatives and how much traffic was going to be there. And the city council and the business people of Bernie thought, oh, my gosh, all these new homes, we're going to get a big tax income, we can build a big city hall, a new library, and all that thing came true. But the problem is that you ended up with a huge traffic mess. And now you're asking private citizens to give up their land to benefit a private developer. And then the developers disappear and the cities are stuck with the problem. Well, this is the Herff Ranch we're talking about, the South Pasture. The Herffs have been one of the major benefactors of Bernie. Ferdinand Herff gave 40 acres for the fairgrounds. My mom and her sister, the Herff twins, gave 50 acres to Bernie for the Bernie High School. My mom just gave 28 acres of the historic Malakoff Hill to the Cibolo Center for Conservation to preserve open space. I put the rest of the hilltop in a conservation easement so that we'll have one hill overlooking Bernie that doesn't have a big mansion by some billionaire or Californian. And we don't put things in conservation easements just to prevent a road. There's no way in hell somebody would put a road over the Malakoff. But we do it to preserve our heritage. We do it to preserve open space. We do it because we love Bernie and we want to keep the culture in Bernie. The reason that people come here is because we have cows right on the city limits grazing, and that's what the South Pasture is. My cousin Carolyn Evans and her husband Brent, they saved the nature center. They saved the Herff farm. And we're just conservationists that want to keep open space. And a road through there, it's the only place where we have a native bluebonnet field. And we're just against it. And I just want you all to keep that in mind. I could go on, and I will give up the rest of my time to my cousin who owns the property.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Drought. Billy Kennan is my first cousin. Our mothers are twin sisters. Both of them are going to have their 100th birthday coming up in a couple of weeks. I bought the back 60 acres of the South Pasture that Billy was just talking about, and I'm in the process of putting a conservation easement on it. I already have it drafted, and I hope to have this in place in the next several months. I echo what Billy says about what the Herffs have done for this community, and I hope that this committee doesn't make a recommendation that our land be taken from us. And I appreciate your concerns. Thank you very much. Well, one other comment I wanted to make that I forgot about. About 10 years ago, I had my daughter, who is a lawyer in our law firm, make an application to have the Herff Ranch classified as a family heritage ranch through the Texas Agricultural Commission, and it was granted that right, 150 years of family heritage use. Thank you.
Mr. Drought, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
What I heard you say, and thank you for being here today, both you and your cousin. It's been helpful because we have talked about that particular piece at length. This committee made a commitment, I think, early on that we wouldn't draw lines on a map or recommend lines be drawn on a map without talking to the landowner. And so I think bringing this up is akin to talking to the landowner. So my question for you is, do you object it being shown as a part of the major thoroughfare plan, provided can you support it being shown as part of the major thoroughfare plan, provided it not be ever acquired by eminent domain?
I really don't have a problem with it being drawn on the map, but I do have a problem, obviously, with eminent domain.
Right.
And we would fight that vigorously if it ever came to pass.
Right.
But that's my position.
Okay, I think that's clear to me, and I appreciate you all again being here today.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments from the public? Or any of the people, Tom Adelstein or Denise Deaver, you'll have comments early in the meeting?
Don, this is Tom. Can you hear us?
You might turn it up a little bit, Tom. I can barely hear you. Try again, Tom.
Okay, is this any better?
A little bit.
Not much, huh?
There you go.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Now you're good.
That's good now.
Okay. I also wanted to comment on the eminent domain and as it relates to this committee. For me, the Kendall County Bernie Fair Oaks Transportation Committee is a committee made up by citizens and for citizens. These are, some of you all are government officials, but you're mainly here. Most of the folks are as citizens. And what we learned from the whole Gateway project is Kendall County does not want to use eminent domain to take their property just so others can get better commercial business or school routes. We should be focusing on making the best, most efficient, and creative use of the infrastructure we have now. As it has been talked about a lot on this committee, the wide nodes, narrow roads, that's a creative solution. There are creative solutions to eminent domain. I understand what Mr. Kite was saying about that we would have to acquire land to do some of these projects or a lot of the projects. Well, there's other ways besides eminent domain, and I think this committee should be looking at stating that the citizens do not want eminent domain. How do we make things work without it? There's land swaps, there's the county and city buying property from people. There's a lot of things. And I think we need to try other things rather than fall back on eminent domain. Let's go with what the citizens asked for and try to do it that way first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Adelstein. Ms. Deaver, are you wanting to say anything this morning or this afternoon?
I'll wait to the end and see
Okay.
how much time you got.
Thank you.
I think you need to get on.
Okay, well then let's get on with it. I hope everybody brought their package of projects with you today. There was one request as public comment from the last meeting that we reconsider a project. I think it was sequence number 105. It was a short connection on Calk Street, I believe it was.
Yep.
Calk and Cibolo Crossing.
Calk and Cibolo Crossing. And so if you could find that, anybody, I think it's about maybe look at 5 or 6 from where we stopped last time.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the request was that we had agreed to put it on the short-term list because it was a connection of Cibolo Crossing to Calk Lane that allowed some movement back and forth there parallel to Old San Antonio Road. And the request was that we not make that connection in the interest of leaving the peace and tranquility, particularly of the Calk Lane neighborhood, untouched.
Park Meadows.
Yeah, Park Meadows, okay. So that's the neighborhood that's south, the southern neighborhood, I believe. Is that?
That's
okay.
correct.
So we're going to reopen that discussion in deference to the request, so it's open.
So my understanding of the original recommendation was to facilitate school kids back and forth, which seemed like a good idea at the time. And based on Tom's recommendation, I took a look at the two neighborhoods. The Calk Lane neighborhood has about 5 homes, approximately 5 homes that could possibly be sending kids to school. The remainder of that entire street is the senior living environment. And then looking at the Cibolo Crossing neighborhood, that potentially is where most of the kids are, but it's also fronting on Johns Road. So there really wouldn't be foot traffic going to and from school needing to truly cross over, other than perhaps these 5 houses on Calk Lane. It is probably about 20 feet from one little round, dead end to the other, and it goes right over a drainage ditch, which is approximately 50 feet from the Cibolo Creek. If anything could happen or should happen, perhaps a pedestrian access, but it serves two neighborhoods that have very different needs. We have one neighborhood that has a lot of seniors that might not enjoy having a bunch of kids running through it. And the seniors then may also want a little bit more mobility across the creek without going out and around. But they'd end up on Johns Road as well, which is just as busy. So I'm not sure that is even a good recommendation. So I offer I'm proposing that we go ahead, we remove 105 from our list of recommendations. I think it really doesn't serve traffic needs, and I'm not sure it equally serves each neighborhood. And thank you, Tom, for calling attention to it.
Other comments?
I have a question about it. So I haven't driven back there in a long time, so I can't recall. Looking at the aerial imagery, it looked like the homes on Calk Lane it looked like they didn't front Calk Lane. It looked like they all fronted that little cul-de-sac, separate little loop.
That's correct.
To the lot. And so I was unclear how having connection traffic through Calk Lane would impact those people who don't even, it's not like their houses are fronting it. It seems like it could potentially impact the people on Cibolo Crossing a lot more because that's their front yard. But can you clarify that? I wasn't following how that, for cut through traffic or kids running through. It didn't seem like they would be going down that little loop on the side.
That's correct.
Yeah, I'd have the same question. It doesn't, from the layout, look like it's a major impact one way or the other, but it does provide a different route for, even medical traffic, and I'm not sure there's that much traffic given the number of kids in the Chalk Lane development.
The one thing it does do is it moves traffic away from the intersection of Johns Road and School Street, which is a parent's concern, is what I've heard from some of the parents that have kids that attend schools in that neighborhood. How that balances out with, I'm not sure how that needs to be weighed in as well with the needs of the two neighborhoods.
Don, may I throw in a couple of points? I was the one that brought that up. I know it's out of hand.
Please go ahead, Tom.
So you're right that the Park Meadows, that for those who aren't familiar, there's 25 fourplexes there, so roughly 100 abodes. Those folks, for the most part, some of them are active, not all of them, but they do walk around the neighborhood. They do walk out of the front. Many of them have cars, and they drive out of there. So it would impact them that if traffic was to go through there and, their traffic is slower and they walk slower and a lot of them have walking devices. One little story, Mr. Brightwell, who lives there, he goes across the street every morning around school time and feeds the ducks. Not a big deal, but it's a man's life and he surely enjoys that. As far as helping emergency vehicles get in there, I can tell you emergency vehicles have no problem getting in there. They get in there, honestly, frequently and post-haste. So it's just a quality of life for these folks that they have a nice, serene, low volume for them to walk and to drive around, even though they are not on that main street. Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Tom.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Okay, we have a request from Bitsy to remove this from the list of short-term projects.
I'd like to have one more point of discussion, if that's all right. I find myself sort of struggling with how to balance two conflicting principles of this committee. Not the first time. One of those principles that we've talked about is a desire to have a community that's more interconnected, less cul-de-sac developments, so that people can travel through and have alternative travel routes. The other is listening to the people of the community, and the reality is that first principle is never going to be met because every local subdivision is going to probably argue, for the same thing. My sense is if it was a policy that was spread wide around the city, lots of connections were added, no one choke point would feel a massive impact from everybody rerouting through them. But if only a few little places are done, a lot more impact could happen. So I just say that to say that I'm conflicted, because I look on the map, those roads are right there. It looks like it adds another connection. It looks like people could get from neighbors to, houses right there. Yet at the same time, if the people in that area don't want it, how do we approach that? So I'm just sharing those thoughts.
And may I ask, how is this connection going to be made? Who owns that property? Do we know?
City.
City owns it completely?
I don't know.
It's, I mean, what we're talking about is adding culvert, basically.
It is a culvert.
A big culvert.
Well, I mean, there's a culvert there now, but it doesn't connect to the
That's
Cibolo crossing.
It's a drainage ditch,
Yeah,
and it
it's a
looks like
drainage
it
ditch.
comes off
Okay.
of some of the drain zones for the senior complex, which is just up from that drainage area.
So you'd have to put a bridge or something over that.
You do. You
Yeah,
do.
big culverts, so.
Bridges are very expensive. I think this is probably a moot discussion.
Well, I think it would
In terms
be-
of finances.
It would also be worthwhile. Jeff did a review of all of the new floodplain maps, and he could also probably tell us if this is a potential flood problem, because literally the outflow is 50 feet from the Cibolo Creek. So, and I've seen that creek, as we all have, rise up pretty high, and I'm not sure how that area is positioned in the new maps.
So to Councilman Body's and Dell's point earlier, we're lacking some information from Jeff Carroll and the city on what exactly can be done here and how much it might cost.
Well, the city, has a big drainage project that goes under Johns Road and comes down in this neighborhood. The Cibolo Basin Drive in that area, they've got a big drainage project through that area. So, I mean, that could be part of that project.
I would just offer that while the connectivity is apparent and seems to be logical, that the amount of traffic and the congestion that we're going to ease, there's no congestion there now, and the enhancement to the mobility of the community is not greatly enhanced. Oh, Jeff Carroll, we were just talking about you. Were your ears burning?
No, I guess so. No, I'm on break from our budget workshop, and I thought I'd come listen for.
All right. Well, we were talking about Caulk Lane and connecting it to Cibolo Crossing Drive, and where is it on the city's list of drainage projects, if at all?
I don't remember off the top of my head that one it's on.
Are you aware that there's a
There's a big concrete ditch there.
but is there a traffic problem or a mobility problem because that roadway does not connect there?
The only thing I can think of is just kind of gridding out that Old San Antonio providing. You can go over to Lattimore, but an option to connect Johns to West San Antonio is giving more options for people to get.
But it's just sort of a philosophical, theoretical
Right.
gridding out.
I don't think there's any existing condition there, but yeah, I think it's just relieving congestion in Old San Antonio by giving people another way to
And
stay
then-
off of Old San Antonio.
I
Jeff?
just wanted to mention that the future land map for Bernie has everything south of that ditch as transitional residential, and so I'm not sure exactly where that falls in if it's built out, if it's infill, and you suddenly have 20 apartments there, or I don't know how that works in the zoning, but it is labeled as transitional residential.
There's not much opportunity towards the senior center, but there is a little bit of opportunity on the other side of Caulk Lane. The question is, that drainage ditch empties into Cibolo Creek?
Correct.
How does that fall in the new flood maps? Do you know?
I don't remember it changing very significantly in that
Okay.
area compared to other parts of town.
Is there much flooding in that area? Do you know?
That entire neighborhood north of there floods very badly. That's one of our projects on our.
That's the one that John was talking about, coming off of John's Road.
So that's the Cibolo crossing side of the.
I've seen people canoeing in the streets.
I would just offer that I think an appropriate action would be to move it from the short-term list to the long-term list.
Yeah.
That way it's apparent that something could be done, but it's probably not going to be done with anything.
I'm good with
soon.
that.
Yeah, it's pretty much built out. There's, you got the retirement community right there. And on the east side of Caulk Lane, maybe someday, but I doubt it.
It's about 3 acres on that side, looks to be, between
well, it's a little more
the
than
little
that,
horse
yeah.
property, and it's not substantial.
No. I mean, we've always looked at that. It'd be nice to have that for circulation, but yeah, I agree with you that and the city does have a big drainage deal on Johns Road and through that neighborhood. But that street, Caulk Lane and Cibolo, they're above the floodplain, so they're not in the floodplain.
Okay.
But I'd put it on the long-term deal.
I'm curious, Tom, how do you weigh in on that idea?
Thank you all for discussing this. I don't see a lot of traffic congestion. I see it as a low priority, but if that's how we categorize it on the long-term list, I'm fine with that, and I thank you for reconsidering.
Okay. Second?
Any objections to moving it to the long-term list? Hearing none, we're moving it to the long-term list, and we will now return to our normally scheduled programming, which is
100.
Reference ID number 100.
Mr. Durden, Chairman, I have just a question about
Yes.
our agenda here. Did we postpone or hold off on item number 4? I apologize if I was not paying attention when that was addressed, but.
You caught me.
Okay.
Actually, we did, and I should have called that out. Mr. Banwell said that they would be ready to present at the next meeting, and that was there in the event that they were ready to present at this meeting.
Would it be appropriate to entertain this idea that I brought up about maybe postponing some of the larger greenfield ones until we've had the eminent domain package adopted?
What's the sense of the committee?
I actually think it's a good idea.
Yeah. I do too. I mean, looking forward, are there a lot of greenfield projects coming up? That's, I guess, the real question. Yeah, and I mean, could we end back to them?
We also have some that we probably need to go back to.
I would make that same.
Yeah.
Like I think that it needs to be addressed as a package.
1, 2.
Okay, well, what we will do then is we'll move forward. If there's a greenfield project, we will say we're going to defer that pending adoption of the policy.
I appreciate that.
All right. I don't want to go backwards anymore today.
So maybe I hate making recommendations because that usually gets you nominated, but seems like maybe we can make a secretarial maneuver and, have 1 or 2 people review what was previously done and bring those together as a bulk, rather than spending time here culling back through the past.
Great suggestion. All right. Moving to reference ID 100. This is a cul-de-sac at Dietz Elkhorn and Fair Oaks Parkway.
Roundabout.
Ralph Fair, excuse me.
Roundabout.
No,
Roundabout.
cul-de-sac.
What did I say? Cul-de-sac? No. Roundabout.
Yeah, not a cul-de-sac.
Boy, that's the way rumors get started.
Non-connectivity.
Yeah.
Let me ask this question, because almost all roundabouts are going to require either right-of-way purchase or eminent domain. So is this one we should also forestall and postpone until that discussion has taken place? Because it's the same issue.
I say no because this is not a greenfield project.
But it is an eminent domain project. It will involve eminent
Possible.
domain if those 4 parcel owners don't want to sell.
It potentially does, yes.
That's what I said a while ago.
Oh, no, it's to John Kite's comment, yes. I mean, so can we actually discuss this? Because ultimately, eminent domain may have to be used, or do we wait on our discussion of eminent domain before proceeding down this path? Just a question. I don't know what the answer is. I just raised the question.
Let me comment, when we listened to the city engineer from Carmel, Indiana, he said that sometimes when they're planning a roundabout, they need some additional land. Number one, not always. And number two, I don't think he ever had to use eminent domain to do it. They just had to buy it. So I don't think we can anticipate, as a general rule, we may be considering 20 different roundabouts on this thing, that everyone by definition will have to be the subject of eminent domain. I think that's a leap too far in my mind. That's presuming the worst.
It seems to me to be a leap too far because we've got other projects that we've added center turn lanes and acceleration and deceleration lanes that we think there's right of way, but we're not quite certain. And there's a few that don't have the right of way designated, such as School Road. So in my mind, they fall in their own category. But the greenfield roads are the ones that launch across the south pasture of the Herff property. That's a greenfield road. The other greenfield road is between Bentwood and Esperanza. It goes across the floodplain that we spoke about last time. There were 3 projects in that same area that were under discussion, and they all pretty much are greenfield. There's no existing infrastructure there. There's no adding on 2 feet here or 2 feet here. It's truly taking somebody's property.
Well, unless they sell it to us. I mean, that's the assumption we're making. The assumption we're making, a very big assumption, is that all these open space areas require eminent domain, but all of these areas will not. And I think it's going to be a mixture of both.
Yeah.
Some people will sell, some people will not. One of these 4 corners may decide, I don't want to sell. Okay, you need my right of way? You condemn it. It's all part of the same argument. I mean, I don't think you can presume all fresh stretches of pavement require eminent domain, just like you can't presume all of these won't.
I think there's an opportunity, though, for a roundabout, which is much smaller than a greenfield road running across the south pasture of the Herff farm. If one of the landowners says, I don't want to sell, I've seen this committee be pretty creative about drawing a roundabout up at 5 points. The School Street Adler thing that eliminated the need to even get the land from the gas station at all. So
there's a home on one of these, like 2 homes right next to the
my
road.
point is, I think there's design creativity opportunities on a roundabout that do not exist on a linear road going through people's, for a mile or 2 or 10 or whatever. I just think it's a whole different category.
Unless you buy it from them, right? Unless they agree to sell. Okay. It's the same issue, though, frankly, between the small roundabout eminent domain and the greenfield's eminent domain. It's just that they don't agree to sell, you're going to take it.
Yeah,
move it over.
The distinction that I see, Tim, is that in one case, you're next to an existing roadway, and so you don't have the sort of implicit taking that you have when you draw a greenfield road across a piece of property. And that's what I've heard the objection is don't put a line across my property because it impacts my ability to sell my land. Putting a line here is not going to impact their ability to sell that land, I don't think. It could, but I think the likelihood that it's going to impact it, I think, is a lot less than with a greenfield road. So that's the kind of difference I see between this and that.
It may be a difference without a distinction, though. I mean, I think the bottom line is someone may not want to sell what they have for whatever reason, whether it impacts their value, their view, they don't want to play ball with the city of Fair Oaks, whatever it is. Yeah. But it's the same issue that you face.
I think you're bringing up a good point. In my mind, it has not been the same issue, and I think it's because it's a matter of degree of impact. To me, the use of eminent domain for you need to make a 2-lane road a 3-lane road, and we need to acquire a marginal edge of right-of-way along where there's already a road. For the people who live there, there's cars driving by right now. A few feet of their property may have to be taken. They may be really upset about that. But the impact to their lives and their property is much less than a brand-new road coming through their backyard or some other. So to me, I just wonder if it's a matter of degree of impact. Whereas, but then maybe I'm thinking about that incorrectly. But in my mind, I've thought of, a roundabout, you're talking about a couple little corners here and here, and in fact, there'll be a lot less accelerating and slowing down of traffic, so maybe it'll help the traffic noise in that little spot and stuff. And so, but yeah, I'm still forming my opinions about this stuff. I appreciate hearing your.
Well, you bring a good point up. I mean, is it a relative degree? Because this is a very slippery slope. And let me just give an example. I mean, I don't want to keep berating this point, but a lot of the folks that come up and say, don't restrict private property owners, don't take their land, are the same ones I see at planning and zoning saying, we want you to impose restrictions on this developer. Or that property owner can't sell their property for no restrictions at the price they want to sell it for because we want you to control what can go there. We want you to limit density. We want you to limit access. That is taking. That is a taking. When the city of Bernie says you can't use your land for X, that's taking property rights. With Jonah's example, even here, Jonah, the folks that live, there are several houses there because I pass through there all the time on the way to Fair Oaks Country Club. The folks that live there, they may say, yeah, you're taking 5 feet of my property, but now I've got much more traffic because you've got a wider node here, and my house is 10 feet away, whereas in a greenfield space, the nearest house on this property of 100 acres may be 300 yards away. Who is impacted more? I'd argue these folks would be. Now, granted, I understand the argument because my wife and I have a conservation easement over half our property in Gillespie County, and it's significant. And we put it there because we didn't want it developed. I get it. But public policy is balancing of interest for the common good. And whether we balance interest for a roundabout or for a missing link in a roadway that we're never going to get because the land's not going to be developed, it's the same issue. Really, honestly.
So I'd
ask us to think about very carefully how we approach that.
I think at the end of the day, this is a citizen committee that's trying to craft a policy for what we put forth. These lines, I mean, we can say we're against eminent domain in all circumstances, but at the end of the day, the city can use it, and TxDOT in particular can come in and say, nice line, let's go. And so, I think what we're arguing about is not an absolute. It's just simply our suggestion. So I think in terms of grades and degrees, that language feels more comfortable. But at the same time, I think we can come out very strongly against the use of eminent domain to actively engage with our recommendations.
Well, I agree, but I just want to be sure we're intellectually honest about this whole approach. I mean, it's the same issue, whether it's a roundabout, taking property there, or across a segment of property.
From a property taking standpoint,
Sure.
I agree with you. From an impact, I think it's case, it depends on the specific case.
I think it's one is slightly modifying existing infrastructure and making, small lines, and the other is adding a whole new type of infrastructure through an undeveloped natural space. So.
Yeah, and I think on the policy recommendation that we make, we can modify it for that type of situation. Because we also, as a policy, I believe, because we've had a lot of discussion about it, these wider nodes concept, which we have endorsed as a policy. And so we don't want to conflict with the two policies that we put together. So I think we can craft something with the policy recommendations that address the potential on the wider nodes and along existing traffic routes that I think would satisfy the people and allow the process to move forward. So anyway, I think we can do on the policy recommendations and remain consistent with what we're trying to do, and that is make more efficient traffic.
I think on the roundabouts, really you need to look at the traffic volumes and all this that goes with it. And I would say that what we say is consider these for future study and let them figure out how much do you really need any right of way here? And if you do, then whoever the entity that owns the thing, like Fair Oaks here, then it's up to them if there's right of way required to get it.
I looked up this project when it was before the Fair Oaks Ranch City Council. I do not believe right-of-way was needed. I can't quite tell because I'm using my phone. But the schematics, it's a very small roundabout, and I don't think, do you remember, Marcus?
I don't think it required right away. It was mostly just an intersection improvement, enhancement.
And then, did the city council vote it down? The citizens?
It was never brought back to council. So they brought it to council and then for recommendations, and I think they tabled it and then it never came back.
Was there a lot of public opposition to it at the time? Do you know that? I mean, I'd be curious to hear the backstory.
I believe it was funding, more financing and
Correct.
fund availability to implement it more than anything.
In that case, I move to support this project.
And Fair Oaks is currently working on, they have Dietz reconstruction going for one segment. So it goes up to this intersection. More than likely, this intersection is going to get improved.
Somewhat.
Somehow, yeah.
So you want to support it as a long range or short range?
It's going to happen in the short range.
So short range? Okay, we have recommendation that the motion that this be considered to be a short range project.
Second.
Any objections to that? Hearing none, it's added. Okay, moving to reference ID 17, not a cul-de-sac, but a roundabout at Bentwood and 474. This
It's
is
a
in front of the
TxDOT
school.
project.
There was a short-term recommendation to add a center turn lane and a sidewalk and bike lane on the pedestrian side of Esser. It already has a sidewalk, but this is kind of a 3-lane road that has no striping. So it's also the parking area for football games. So I think have we talked about it yet, Northern?
We talked about this project a whole lot.
Yeah. It has
Restriping Esser Road, and we got flack from the school that when they have big football and baseball games there, that they park. And you can't deny them the use of the street to park on because there's no other place to go. There's sidewalks on the west side of Esser now. They're real narrow in places, but there are sidewalks. And if, I don't know, again, this is a TxDOT roundabout if you did it. And you're going to wind up probably taking some property on the southwest corner there and maybe the southeast.
So the corner, one corner is part of the county. One part of that corner is part of the county services, early voting and so forth. So it is publicly held, and the other corner is sort of the lawn area for the school district, entering into the ball fields and so forth.
Yeah, so Bitsy, I understood the previous discussion around Esser Road to be separate and apart from the treatment of the intersection. That this idea
Okay.
literally is just a roundabout at that intersection. Esser Road could be restriped. And further, John, my recall of that discussion ended up that was so true about people parking during athletic events, but that was a handful of times during a year, and the other 99% of the time, it could be used for the mobility enhancement.
And that is a CIP project that has been discussed.
Yeah, so I don't think that these
With
things
the Esser Road, not the roundabout.
Okay,
The
so
roundabout over-
Yeah.
So the Esser Road project is already CIP, but
Being discussed, yes.
yes, but we haven't talked about the use of a roundabout at that intersection.
That's what this project
I've heard a number of people from the public express concern that high school students and new learning drivers would struggle there. I don't know that the data support that concern. I think the data have repeatedly shown that roundabouts are safer and have fewer accidents, and the accidents are less severe. That said, given that it's an area that impacts the school so much and it's such a central corner spot, I wonder if there's a way to support more of a study of this site for a potential roundabout than to give it a hard recommendation.
Well, one of the things that worked there, and it's worked, because you just put the lights on all four directions, red flash, and there was never a backup. That worked better than the signals. So, they may want to try that.
I use this intersection every morning, and I don't have a problem with it at all, as it is now.
Yeah.
And I watch kids walk to school across right there. The only time it doesn't work is the signals have been completely out, like not even flashing. That's happened a couple of times.
I've had it back up significantly onto Esser Road during school bus traffic peak times.
Oh, yeah.
Where it'll back up, a couple blocks. But I would agree that it actually handles the current load. I mean, if today is the way things are, I don't have a problem.
This was heavily discussed in creating an alternate route around the city and off of Main Street. So I think it's part of that diversion.
The tour.
To, through here, you can move to Main Street and out north or west, or you can go down to Adler and do the same thing. And what that does is it relieves some of the Main Street traffic. So it was part of that conversation, a heavy part of that conversation, because it depends on where you put your emphasis. If you're putting your emphasis on Main Street, then this is part of that. If you're putting your emphasis on traffic volumes through this area, not so much. So I think it has to be considered within that kind of frame. Which way are we going to look at this problem?
Well, and, everybody thinks a roundabout's the answer to everything. But let's actually sit down and look at how much of the time during the day are you really having traffic slowdowns, if you want to say. Maybe an hour. Well, is it worth spending $1 million to solve a 1 hour problem every day? Probably not. And you need to look at how much traffic are you really going to be serving there. And there we've got some new traffic counts. But, it all sounds good, but do we really need to do it?
I think it could easily go into the long-term category, because if we are successful in improving Herff and River Road, we're going to have more traffic moving in that direction, and it probably ought to be part of a new consideration.
Yeah, you got 3,000 vehicles a day just in 4 hours. So.
I like that idea, Bitsy. So
Okay, I think we've got a suggestion that we move this into the long-term, long-range plan, and that we amend the discussion to say it needs to be studied further.
Okay. Thank you.
Any objection to that? Okay, done.
Here's the second leg of that conversation. Reference ID number 18.
Okay. This is a roundabout at Adler and 474, just up the street from the last one.
That takes private property on the east side. What he just got through telling us about.
Yeah. Well, the short-term recommendation was to put a center turn lane coming out of Adler, turning, north on 474. You really have kind of a choke point there, because you can only turn into ongoing traffic. So everybody behind you's got to wait for your opportunity. If there were a center turn lane available, you could pull across one direction of traffic, park there, and wait for your other direction of traffic to clear out.
Well, the city's proposing going to 3 lanes on Adler, so that would take care of what you're talking about.
Well, no, that doesn't actually take care of that, because the choke is turning onto 474 heading out of town, because there is no center turn lane there. So you have to wait
But
until
there
you can
will be-
cross
There will
two.
be 3 lanes when they get through with it.
It'll be a center lane down the entire length of Adler.
Yeah.
But she's
So you
saying,
could turn-
I'm saying on
She needs
474,
one on
which is
474.
the extension of Esser.
Okay, turning left to go towards Main Street to go out 10?
No,
Right.
no, coming off of Adler, turning left on 474 to head out to
Main Street.
Kindalia.
Okay.
So there's a lot of traffic that goes out in that direction. You have Friendly Hills, Spring Creek Estates, Spring Creek. You've got the new development out that way. So you do have quite a few people coming into town and then heading out Adler and then taking a route out on 474.
And they're doing 45 miles an hour at least, so I think that safety lane, suicide lane, we call it, that sometimes lets you just get halfway across. and
Yeah.
wait.
It's an acceleration lane.
There you go. Yeah, because I mean, you know, the center turn lane will keep the Adler traffic from backing up.
Right.
Yay. But at the same time, we still have that left turn that creates,
So you're talking about a 3rd lane going north on 474.
yes, for
In other words,
some,
it's a refuge lane. You can turn left to get in the middle lane until you weave in.
that's correct.
Well, I don't see why we couldn't go to TxDOT and recommend that.
Well, I think it's the.
I think
That
that's,
is the
ultimate.
recommendation.
I got a question about on this drawing. On the west side of 474 at Adler, there's these two, the Curry Creek and Oak Knoll subdivisions are in dark gray. But if you look right at the intersection, there's triangular pieces cut off that are not dark gray. What, is there meaning to the fact that they're white or light color?
I think it's for visibility, isn't it?
Well, there is a
Turn
turning
lane.
lane onto Esser Road and off of Esser Road. If you look at I'm looking at the Google image right now.
Yeah, to the
So
south.
there's two. So you can turn right onto Esser Road to go towards the high school, or coming off of Esser Road, turning right onto Adler.
which is
There
then
are two
becomes,
little
yeah, Esser
sweeps there.
Esser
I don't know
becomes
if that's what that is or
474.
not.
No, that's only on the south side you're talking about. There's nothing on the north side, what Bitsy's talking about.
I don't know.
Here you can have a free right turn lane is there now. And that's just a radius there. That's not a separate lane.
Well, somebody's been driving through the grass on that side and
Yes,
made their
sir.
own triangle.
Okay.
Yes, sir, that's true.
It happens.
It's not me, I have a Prius,
Yeah,
small tires.
I use that intersection all the time, and so what Bitsy's suggesting is on the left turn on 474 off of Adler, you do need I don't know what
It's a
you
right
call
turn
it.
off of
Left
474.
turn on
It's an
acceleration lane, because there is a right turn lane coming
That's
off
what
Adler
What she's
onto
talking about is coming
474.
this way.
When you go left onto Adler from 474, there's a turn lane there. So this is just only missing piece to make that intersection complete.
Is there a recommendation coming out of that?
I recommend putting this on the short-term list. Putting number 18 on the short-term list.
And just for clarification, the recommendation is not a roundabout, as
That's
it might
correct.
indicate. It's the actual committee recommendation to add a center left turn lane to
That-
474.
That's correct. So that would be the subcommittee recommendation and not the crowdsource.
Right, so essentially, we would just nix 18 in lieu of the subcommittee recommendation.
Okay, so reject this one and approve the other one.
In lieu of.
I thought we were voting specifically on subcommittee recommendations as well as crowdsource.
Well,
If
the other
there's a-
one's a roundabout.
The crowdsource
Okay.
comment was a roundabout,
Okay.
but the committee recommendation is 474. What I understand your suggestion or
Oh,
motion is that we dispense the idea of the roundabout and that we go simply with the center left turn lane.
That's
or the
correct.
third lane on 474.
I said that.
Is there any objection to that? Hearing none, we're moving on. This would appear to me to be a greenfield project.
You say that they will defer it?
That would, I'd just wait until somebody say, no, it's not a greenfield
That's right.
project, but if it's greenfield, then we'll defer it.
Some green line.
So no, it specifies create roundabouts at each intersection to, so north bypass is possible without any stops, lights, or signs. So the idea is.
Are we on 43?
No.
40.
You talking about
Did I skip
43?
one?
Wait, where are we?
43.
43.
Did I skip one? I gotta blame Bryce, I'm looking
So,
at this.
no,
My fault,
actually-
guys.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Bryce?
This was one of the ones that we kind of said Bryce can write this
Yeah.
as a concept
That's why it's not in
connection
mine.
between A and B. So we can actually jump ahead.
Okay, we're going to defer 43.
I have it over here. That's why he said the wrong one. My
Okay.
bad, Ben.
I can take it. I can be wrong too, it's okay.
Okay, moving on to reference ID number 80, 80.
No.
Did I take that one out too? I'm sorry, I took all kinds of stuff out.
So, just to be clear,
Coming across.
number 80 is drawn quite oddly. I
Yes.
believe it's meant to be a vertical line, straight up and down. Is that right? And
So this was also
Going
a
through
part of that
somebody's
group of projects that I had between Bentwood and Champion,
Connect
Champion and Esperanza, and so I have, let me pull that up real quick. I can tell you. Sorry.
This is here, but it's got a gate across.
okay, so this is the one that the road is, there's even already some pavement there.
Yep.
It's
Yes,
just an
Deer
emergency
Creek
vehicle route.
Between Vista Verde, Deer Creek, and it connects to Destiny Drive, I believe.
Looks
So
like there's already-
basically, you're extending, the proposal is to extend Deer Creek Drive south to Destiny.
Here's
Is
Destiny.
that correct?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And it's actually Deer Creek Drive. On the other side right there, it's called Deer Creek Drive. And then all that's there right now is a gate.
Yeah, even on the
The
south
roads are-
side, yeah, it's
The
called.
road's there, yes.
Yeah.
There's just a gate in between them.
Is this a homeowner's issue?
Yes.
There's not an association though, right? There's no, it's not gated.
I don't know, that's your neighborhood. Do y'all have a homeowners association? There's not a gated community.
They fought that
Yeah,
to a stop.
it's gated for a reason.
Yeah, it was stopped a long time ago.
Nobody
Time to
wants-
revisit it.
If it makes sense,
Yeah.
we make the recommendation.
Certainly, it's
and-
connectivity.
Yeah.
We're in favor of that.
Yeah.
It's there for emergency reasons, that's why it's got the gate. What did we decide on 43?
The road's already there.
Defer
It's just a gate.
Yeah, the road's there, just a gate.
Can that be lumped in
What did we
the,
decide
in
on
the,
43?
I have that in my packet of
We're defer,
connecting those
John,
neighborhoods, so
defer.
Okay, we got two conversations.
He's asking what we did with
Right,
43.
okay,
No, I'm
43.
asking, what did we do on 43?
Okay, 43 is deferred.
it's in my packet of stuff.
Okay, now let's move to 80.
Same thing.
You
Okay,
like 80.
That was the one we were talking about, the Vista Verde
right.
connection.
And so we want to add that to a short-term
Short-term,
recommendation?
Just have to take the gate out.
Yep.
so it's either the gate or let the
Neighborhood's not gonna like
school buses have access to the gate.
I don't know, yeah. I don't know
I
if
think
they
only
can make
emergency,
turn,
only
but-
emergency vehicles have access to the gate, is my
Right.
understanding.
I'd like to make one suggestion too, is I think 80 makes a lot of sense, especially in conjunction with the connection of other neighborhoods in the
Yes.
area. Doing it in isolation could result in a whole lot of traffic kind of diverting that way. So I don't know if there's some way to,
So you're saying more connection sort of spreads out that potential traffic impact?
right.
Well, this group is going on record as favoring connectivity.
Yes.
Any chance we get. So when those little connections come up, we should be
I
supportive.
will see.
I agree.
So we're added to short-term gate removal or enhanced access?
I am.
Yes.
Any objection?
Chairman Durden, I'm going to excuse myself.
Don't go away, Mad Bitsy.
I'm not. We're good.
All right, moving on to ID number 4040.
See, I haven't been talking about
Sorry,
that.
I'm going to miss the next
Now
one.
we can talk about that.
Sorry. All about Esser and Adler.
I think this was the brainchild of a certain red-headed gentleman to my left.
To your left, yes. Yeah, so again, it was about creating efficient intersections that facilitate flow to bypass the city to the north. Yeah.
Could we modify this, Ben, and just say, create like efficient or optimized intersections in order to create that connection, because I do think, Mr. Kite and others have brought up that in some cases, a roundabout might not be the best fix. In other cases, it might be, but
Yeah, no, I'm fine with it. The point simply being to create a bypass route by just making sure we have very efficient intersections. So wide nodes oftentimes help solve that in various forms, and center turn lanes, et cetera.
And this is specific at River Road and Esser and Adler and Main Street? Is that right?
Right. Well, also possibly at Plant, although going up into Tupperwine, you don't have a lot of traffic at this time.
So it's a suggestion here that we pursue this as a project from basically the school Adler Street intersection down to where it connects to River Road? Or is this a concept that we want to put forward?
It's a concept.
I think it's
not
a
a project
concept
in itself.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
so
it's
how
a
do we
concept.
reflect concepts in our recommendation?
Well, study bypass routes to alleviate traffic through downtown or something like that.
Gary?
Aren't we addressing most of these components of this overall concept in different projects?
Right, we have, and I guess what I'm trying to lead us up to is maybe a grouping of projects that would fall along this, and that this would be, this concept of, there would be a narrative that discusses an alternate way through or around Bernie that can be completed by these different projects.
yeah, and I think maybe
It's a study group that needs to do that.
some kind of prioritization of these. We think this is a priority to try to connect this.
Well, then it's the time I want to remind us, we briefly have discussed as part of this exact concept, although we're still waiting on truck traffic data from Streetlight, to make this exact route also be a truck route. To keep major trucks off of Main Street.
Well, keep in mind, they'd be running right by Currington Elementary that way. And there'd be some parents who may not want large trucks.
I hear you. It's
running by
very,
Currington.
to me, the right-of-way is huge. That could be made very safe, to me.
Well, and actually, as I pointed out to Rich Saina, Currington could come off of Plant. You could eliminate that entrance and exit off of Adler, and they've
True.
got already access to Plant. But that would require coordination with the school district.
Plant and there's another street too
There's another street that comes off of Blanco that goes up straight to the school, dead ends right at the school. All they got to do is tie up a couple hundred feet.
It's
of
Becker
pavement.
Street.
Becker, yeah.
From the
Becker
side,
Street.
yeah.
Yeah.
The
And
Becker neighborhood
that would get
really
all
wants
queued
that.
on that street with no traffic.
And it could create that all the way around Plant and Blanco.
So do you guys want to consider that study group looking at it being a truck route or not?
There's also the mobility planning committee that the city's doing, and I could see us taking this on. Which
Probably a better place to
I
do
think
it.
it's a better place than Jonah's there,
I agree.
Tim Bamwell's there, Bryce Bodion there, and then Rich Senna's there. So.
Okay, well, it's going to take somebody remembering it's a thing to look at.
Bob, what we could say is that we could change that roundabouts, like optimize intersections for this, or somehow prioritize this as an alternative route, and then consider or study or the possibility of it being a truck route through town as well.
Right, the possibility of a truck. Route.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd be okay putting that in writing, that we'll explore that, but won't necessarily commit to something at this time.
Okay, so we're moving this from a project type of recommendation to a narrative somewhere in the body of the report that discusses it as a concept.
But I thought we would do that, but also connect the projects that this committee reviewed.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I agree.
It's a package.
So I can
Because I
remove
think
it
it'd
from
be
the table, correct?
A mistake not to put this in a report.
Northern just needs an answer.
Yeah. Northern made an executive decision.
Keep open, she said.
So this will be pulled from the table since you guys are doing a narrative, and the things remaining in the table are going to look like that. And the narrative won't.
Which of you guys are doing the narrative? Is that Ben?
I guess it's me. Well, we'll work on it. On our.
I'm going to put it off to the side.
Thank you.
Okay, just so we're clear. What we're approving here is that Ben is going to add or write a narrative that we will add to the report to discuss this concept and the specific projects needed to implement this concept.
Got it.
Everybody good with that? Okay, good. Including truck route. Discussion. Okay. North Esser Road, this is,
So I believe 54 and 99, the next two, are both covered by the subcommittee's recommendation, but so everyone please double check me on that.
when you say it's covered by the subcommittee recommendation.
I believe so. I believe everything in there is covered by the subcommittee recommendation, so we could just defer to that recommendation rather than including these.
The subcommittee, the interim subcommittee? Or which subcommittee you mean?
Bitsy's.
Bitsy's subcommittee, okay. So we're going to take that out of this?
So we're rejecting these two?
I would say we're rejecting them in favor of moving them to a subcommittee recommendation.
So what are we gonna do with 54 now?
Both of those, 54 and 99 have been
Because they
are
are-
part of the subcommittee's recommendations already.
The issues brought up there are pretty much already covered by the subcommittee's recommendation. Correct.
Well, I mean, it's part of the recommendation. What is the recommendation then?
To restripe Esser between River Road and Blanco.
I saw that.
And add turning lanes between Blanco and Greyhound.
Well, they need to go ahead and go all the way up to the first street that goes into Bentwood.
Deer Creek
That's
Drive.
They
Deer
do.
Creek.
I think the
That's where-
subcommittee recommendation
Yeah,
is.
because it comes back in there.
It does, yeah.
Okay, moving on to project ID 149. This is the
Joshua Springs.
Joshua Springs sharp turning movement that is impacted by trucks and vehicles with trailers. It's a TxDOT project. I mean, for the many people in Kendall County that aren't necessarily City of Bernie residents, but are ag residents.
Livestock show.
Yeah, livestock
That
show
pool trailers.
people and the horse people, this is an important thing, not to mention.
I suggest we also include reference ID number 29 as part of this discussion.
Where is that one, John?
8 or 9 goes down the list. It has to do with the feeder road, the difficulty making right turn,
Yeah, I think they're actually, those are kind of like alternates. One, we can talk about both of them right now. I believe that 29 would be a long-term project, but 149 would be short-term.
But since, I guess the point being is, do we consider them both at the same time since the conversation?
Okay, sure.
29, literally? Yes.
Where is that at?
About 7,
29 is way ahead. Okay.
To be clear, 149, the recommendation there is to, and this came from the interim committee, is to add an exit ramp from the eastbound I-10 main lanes to the access road so that people can access Joshua Springs Park easily. And it's to, second part of that is to improve the intersection or the turning radius at the bridge and the cross underneath the I-10 main lanes.
And again, this is another one where if everyone is okay with the concept of this project, both 149 and 29 have a very nice narrative already written from the interim report. So if we're okay with this, then we can just move ahead.
I'll just add one thought, which is I think this is probably a needed project that solves a issue. I don't think it's a congestion-related project that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of cars backing up long distances there being long wait times. Maybe I'm wrong, but so I don't know if that changes how we approach it, but I think it seems like a worthwhile project. It doesn't seem to me to address a big congestion problem in the town. Just to make that point. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know the area very well.
And this incorporates the county too, not just Bernie.
But is it a congestion problem?
Well, it can be. It's actually a safety issue as well. If there's an accident on eastbound I-10 between this location and Comfort, all of the I-10 traffic gets on 289. And then you get here, and if somebody gets their truck hung up because they didn't make the turn properly, then you have blocked effectively everything.
Okay, so I was hearing it more as it's more convenient to get to the Joshua Park.
Well, it is most of the time, but it can quickly, but in a safety situation, emergency situation, become.
Well, actually, this is really two different projects. The first one would be the 149, which addresses the turning radiuses underneath the bridge. That's something that needs to be done now.
Right.
The other, you're wanting an exit ramp going eastbound on 10. Well, due to the spread into 289 away from 10, you can only do it almost at the county park, or you do it all the way up at the interchange, it's part interchange up there. So I would say separate the two, and 149 is something that ought to be done now.
I agree with that.
And the other part of it, that exit ramp, you're going to have to work with TxDOT, and they're going to have to get with the feds to get approval and all that. So that'd be a long-term deal. It'd be nice to have, but it's a long-term. But this other one ought to be a short-term, not really too expensive.
I second Mr. Kite's motion that he didn't realize he was making.
Okay, well, we have, I think he explained it carefully enough. Anybody have any questions about what he's proposing?
So is the narrative there under the committee recommendation sufficient?
It is. I think we'll split into two projects, one of which will be a short-term recommendation, and one of which is long-term. The exit ramp being the long-term. Okay, moving on to 29 now, which is several down the road, just for the purpose of clarity and familiarity. This extends the frontage road from the location that we're improving the radius through TxDOT right-of-way
There it is.
down to the intersection of the underpass at Waring Welfare Road in Nelson City.
I can't support that at all. That's millions of dollars for what you can still go down 289 where the trucks go now. Again, the main thing that needs to be done is those radiuses under the bridge on 289. But so far as going south on the west right-of-way of 10, as far as I'm concerned, that's not going to happen.
If John Kite, the highway engineer, is not going to support an access road extension, I'd suggest that we take it out of the recommendations.
Yeah, I would too.
I would too.
would too.
Because access road says it all. Access to what?
You what?
The name access road. Access
No.
to what? What are they trying to access?
I don't know why.
There's
I mean, all they gotta do, the people on this Allen Road, all they gotta do is go under the bridge, go on 289, and why would you spend millions of dollars for almost nothing?
Well said. I can't top that.
Moving on.
Yep.
Let's see, ID 160. The recommendation here from crowdsourcing was a speed bump or signage to reduce the speed on Fuller Drive,
160.
which is way off of Highway 46, close to the county line, it appears.
What number are you on?
160. I don't know if we have any reps from that area.
You know, we had a basic understanding when it came to a lot of these small sidewalk projects and some more safety-related projects. I think these need to be kept in some way, identified that the person felt this area was extremely dangerous. But I also don't know how many of these types of projects there are and whether we have the information we need to really address them here.
I mean, this is a very minor, obviously low vehicle count situation, and I think we should pass this along.
And we could either skip it altogether or we
I
could
would-
just put
I
it in a
would not
bucket
put it
of
in-
safety-related comments.
It's not a transportation plan project.
It's a councilperson request, right, Councilman Buddy? I want a
Not,
speed bump.
not in my district.
County Commissioner.
You passed the buck on
There
that
you
one.
go.
You don't wanna put speed bumps out in the middle of a long road.
There are not a lot of houses out there.
All right, so we're going to say out on 160. You have objections?
You totally pulled that up.
It's out. ID 182.
There you go, 182.
This is a suggestion to work with HEB to put a drop-off point for shuttle buses and ride-share somewhere within their campus.
Bob, you used to work for them. Can you make that happen?
You know, it's a great idea. I don't think it belongs in this report. And
Yeah.
in the committee decision or comments, it says city should discuss with HEB. So
Yeah.
my advice is, having worked at HEB, they know how to listen. So
Can we just
if
get
the
this on
community makes
Jeff's
this-
to-do
If
list?
somebody approaches them and makes this request, they're good listeners.
It's a good idea. It's an easy solution.
Who's that city council?
Put it on my pile.
There you go.
Is that Bryce
Count-
volunteering?
I think Councilman, sorry, Bryce was spacing your last name. You could always just delegate that to Jeff Carroll. He's not here. And I
Oh,
think
yeah,
that's the
that's-
committee tradition.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So is this going to stay in and Bryce is actually going to write it, or are we just saying that it's being
I believe
told?
it comes out as a recommendation.
Okay.
We're not including this recommendation. We're going to trust the councilman will take care of it.
I don't know, it's off.
Since it's on video.
Okay, moving to project ID 24. This is a suggestion for a roundabout at Herff Road and Old San Antonio Road.
Now,
Already
there's just
served.
about enough right of way to do the roundabout there. Yep.
John Kite's saying put a roundabout in.
No, I'm saying.
He didn't say that.
I didn't say that. I said if they decide to do it, there is enough right of way there, I think, to go ahead and put a roundabout.
There is a bridge project going in there too. Would that
That's set back enough, I think.
affect, we build a bridge roundabout?
It just goes into it.
Build all kinds of.
Just like River Road and Main Street.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about that location is, one of the things we learned is that roundabouts function quite well when the traffic is pretty similar from the different angles. This is a site where Herff Road probably has the most traffic. San Antonio Road or Old San Antonio going north probably has the least. And Old San Antonio going south probably has a moderate amount. I'm curious, Mr. Kite, if you have, just from your experience, if you think that the loads are similar enough there where this probably would be a good spot for one.
There's enough there, but you got to slow them down. They can't be running there at 45 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But I think once they understand how to drive them, they'll work. Now, right at first, a lot of people say, oh, they're terrible, they're death traps and all that. Well, if you don't know what you're doing, yeah, they may be. But once you understand how they work and go, so I would say leave this one in as a proposal.
John, I have a
Second.
question for you. You said something real important to this committee sometime back, and that was to the effect that our first roundabout needed to work, needed to be a success. Would this qualify?
Yeah.
Okay. Make sure you raise your hand whenever a roundabout meets your criteria, because I buy into what you said. I think you're spot on. If the first roundabout built in this community is a failure for any number of reasons, that would stifle any future roundabouts. And if you remember the story of Carmel, Indiana, the public fought like crazy over where the first one would be, what its design would be, and would it work. And by the time they were at 138, the public's fighting like crazy over what kind of public art or landscaping is going in the middle of them. So they started with a successful one.
See, one thing a roundabout does with signals, you build up queues. And like right now, we go through Herff Road and 46 quite a bit. Well, it's not unusual to have the right turn traffic backed up past Oak Park.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've gotten them all stopped. With a roundabout, they're free to flow all the time. You don't have these queues that build up. And once the people understand how to drive these things, they work great. But like I say, the same thing. Whatever we do, the first one we build has got to work, or you've screwed yourself on all the rest of them.
Having driven on these throughout Europe for a number of years, you're a quick learner on these things. There are a lot of American military personnel go into countries that have roundabouts, and it's not rocket science. Once you're into that thing, you learn pretty quick how to navigate through them.
If not, you're dead, right?
Well,
just kidding.
Yeah, and they've
Or,
got
you're or dizzy.
You don't fall
keep
asleep.
They need to be sized right. You can't cram a little tiny one in there with truck traffic, and you don't necessarily need a huge one. Then you're going to get high speed trying to go around those things.
My question is this a short or long-term project?
This is a good project.
It's what?
Good project, so I think
I would
sooner the better.
I would say it
That's
needs
John's
to be a
position.
short term because we're
Yeah,
going to be
short term.
approaching this for drainage issues anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we don't approach it now, then we're
Okay, recommendations for short-term project? Objections?
none.
No.
I'm announcing it.
That's it.
Okay, this is, as we move south, looks like this is another roundabout at the intersection of Highway 87 and Herff Road.
John, I believe you drew a mock-up of one at that location. Is that
Yeah.
right?
That one, I think there's existing right of way, and if it's not, it's probably highway right of way anyhow.
I think that one could also be really neat as far as entrance into our community. People exit out of San Antonio and they come in. You could have some piece of art in the middle of it. It's immediate. Even though, there's a whole lot of commercial development there, it could be a neat introduction, entry to the town.
Yeah, that's a 3-point. Actually, the main traffic is just 3 points, but it'll work. Now, and one thing we need to be careful about on these roundabouts, I don't think we need to be building a dual lane roundabout. I think we need to have, as you approach the roundabout, a right turn lane that gets you off, so you don't have to get on the roundabout to do that. You just make a right turn. And then all the rest of the traffic then goes on the roundabout. And that's very less confusing, and I think it'd work better. But like I say, if we don't build the right one the first time, it's bad.
All right.
We now have a dual left turn lane off of Herff onto 87, so we wouldn't have 2 lanes through the roundabout?
You don't need them. You got a free flow.
Okay, you're comfortable with that?
Yeah. And you got, in other words, as you come there, Now you'll have a right turn, which dumps your right turn traffic, and then the middle lane goes roundabout. That's less confusing.
Okay.
Can
So
I?
the recommendation is short-term?
Yeah.
Yes, and I'd like to also recommend, if, Northern, do you have the mock-up that, I think it would be helpful to include a picture of the mock-up that Mr. Kite drew along with this, and maybe.
I think I
any
have
other
that
ones.
scanned in. If I don't, I can get it.
Well,
That's
we
my,
can
that's
get
my
a- we
note to
can do a
myself
better
down
one.
there to get the drawing.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing holds true when you go up to Christopher Drive right there by Walmart. A roundabout would work great right there, and I think there's enough right of way to fit it on.
That's another recommendation too, isn't it?
I think, I don't know, I hope it is. But you gotta
We'll
remember,
see, we might get there.
you gotta remember, these are TxDOT roads, so we're gonna have to fool with them. Okay, Herff Ranch.
Reference ID number 45.
This guy a Red Bull.
Love it.
Now, isn't
This one's
that
already,
under,
city's already got this one.
it's happening.
So
I think we can get rid of it.
remove it.
Yeah.
Delete.
Yes.
Reference ID 125. I would say that's a greenfield project.
Looks like it.
Defer. Reference ID 163. This is left turn lane.
So this is under I-10 headed out to Ranger Creek. And if y'all remember, we had somebody from that neighborhood, I think, come and speak about that.
So, and we discussed this in the meeting. We said we were more comfortable with extending the access roads on both sides, between Johns Roads and Ranger Creek, because those aren't there.
That's gonna be awful tight to try something like that.
So they're just asking for a turn lane right
Correct.
there to be able to get under the bridge.
They're asking for a left turn lane.
And we have shoreline going in up there as well. So there'll be a lot more traffic coming.
What they really need to do is move that ramp. TxDOT needs to pull that ramp back to the south. Now, I don't know when they're gonna do that, whenever they, because they're stopping right now at Johns Road. But the next step would be up here, and that exit ramp is a bad exit ramp to start with. The profile is bad. And it's a two-way situation up to the turnaround, so cul-de-sac. But I mean, it's a good project, I guess.
So what I would need is someone to write what the recommendation is for this intersection. If it's not this, if it's not,
So-
what is it?
So Northern, I'm just looking at the aerial photo. And I think in order to add a turn lane, like if you're coming from the south going north and you're looking for a turn lane, it's going to require, you're sitting on a bridge right there. So it's going to require widening the bridge. Is that correct? Am I looking at the-
Probably you are, yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to do that, and then underneath the IH-10, you got the Cibolo Creek here in a road, and you're real compacted in there.
That's one
And
expensive turn
anytime
lane.
you get a rain, you're not gonna get through because it floods it. But anyhow, that's beside the point. They need that left turn lane, but I don't know if there's enough room to do it.
John, would you be able to write the explanation about what needs to be done here?
Okay, on 163?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And so we want to suggest this as a long-term project?
Probably will be a long-term project.
I would think so.
It's a suggestion to TxDOT, I guess.
Brief timeout. How many people in the audience have comments that they would like to make as we conclude the meeting? That looks like zero to me.
We need to say something controversial.
And
I see a hand up on the.
Ms. Deaver wants to make one, so
like
they will plow through a couple more projects before we move on. Okay. Reference ID 29.
We talked about this one.
I'm sorry, I have 96.
Oh, we already did
Yeah,
that one.
29
It's out.
We did like a hop to.
Moving to 96.
You told us to, John.
Yeah, all right.
Makes sense.
We're staying there.
Mhm. Makes sense.
Sorry.
It's all right.
96.
Extension of access roads from 89 to 473. Oh, that's in Comfort.
Right.
Oh, I think, didn't we say that, that's not gonna happen?
I mean, it's one of those cases, John, where if somebody comes in and they do something at that interchange, like a hotel or some big traffic generator, then they probably need it. But the compelling need for one of the access roads right now, I'll say the westbound one, is to keep traffic from going through 473 through that residential neighborhood there and just keep them on the interstate. But traffic is not bad now and probably won't be for several years. So I think we could put it on a long-range study for be good.
There's a huge floodplain area.
56.
Still in Comfort. 1376, we're back down.
Yeah, this is back North Main Street. Mhm.
I think we'd looked at this before and we talked about putting street light or lights. What was that the consensus?
Oh, this is the place where they just put the yellow
They just
flashing
put-
lights.
They just put flashing lights in there, so it's done.
Yeah, it's all jacked up though.
Well,
I think there's still a concern about.
It's still not a good intersection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that rather than a congestion
This is a
relief,
safety
this is a safety
Yeah.
issue because people are really moving through that. And you got to you don't know what lane you want to be in and whether you're going to Kerrville or whether you're getting on the access road. People, and it's just very dense. It's a rough one.
I think it's a long-term project, needs to be looked at though by TxDOT.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's not a congestion-related thing, but safety.
Safety.
And what they have done there has helped considerably.
ID 31, Johns Road. This is part of the subcommittee recommendation, is that right, Northern?
Right in front of Fabra.
You know, I've said before, the school has created these problems. They need to help pay for correcting some of these problems. So, I don't know.
Does it make sense to run them down Lattimore Boulevard and get on Jones Road? I mean, there's a hell of a lot of runway there.
If they could tie into Lattimore and make a loop of their own where people could queue in and stop and wait for them to pick up the kids.
Northern, you get to sit in this quite a bit, right?
Mhm.
Do you have any recommendations?
You're pleading
the fifth?
Flying cars. I mean,
Flying cars.
Flying cars. I think the third lane might help, or
They should have planned for this when they come to the school.
I thought we had some discussion about that with Rich Sinna about possibly moving cars onto that north-south road.
We did
right there,
with the Fair Oaks Elementary. This same conversation.
Where is Mr. Sinna still on this committee? We haven't seen him in a little
I
while.
think he's talking about the bond.
Yeah, he's busy stopping.
Hopefully they can add some money to fix
Yeah.
Jones Road.
I don't think it's in the package.
I don't think it is. Do the buses come around?
The buses line up on the Lattimore. They go through the Lattimore parking lot.
Okay.
The parents back up easily to the apartment complex on Johns Road.
And you have to come in from that way. If you're coming in from this way, do people let
Yes,
you in?
you line up from, they line up from, what is that, Lattimore? There's a line of cars from Lattimore
Yeah.
to the bus queue, or to the pickup queue, and there's a line of cars from the other direction from about Carrington Place into school every day. The problem is, if there are cars waiting to turn into school in front of Carrington Place, there's no turning lane there. So you've got cars pulling into opposing traffic
The school is
and weaving around.
Yeah, the
It's-
school's right there.
So a turning lane would be helpful?
Yes, I believe so.
And there is a recommendation short-term we can make to city because we have drainage way improvements going in on Johns Road. And that could be part of this process and might be part of the process.
I'm gonna put down city project.
Suggestion for short-term then?
Yes.
Any objections?
I do wonder if you're going to do a center turn lane, do you run it pretty much all the way down to School Street? I mean, you got a bridge there, I recognize that. But I don't know. I'm just trying to think future-proofing instead of, or is that worth even talking about?
I think that when you get down that way, you start looking at the drainage problems that you have and don't want to do that until you can solve the drainage problems too.
Okay, are they already working on that, or?
Yes.
So then we probably should recommend that they look at the whole package. I'm just throwing it out there. Otherwise, you could have a drainage ditch. You could say, oh, now we need a center turn lane. We need that for a road.
3 lanes.
So,
We're there for the 3 lanes.
how about we take that back to the
And I don't think that's a traffic congestion.
Mobility
issue. Maybe
committee
it's a
or-
safety? No.
So the recommendation would be to couple it. Don't we have other recommendations on Johns Road in here?
Yeah.
The subcommittee
Yes.
did recommend, the Phase 1, add center turn lane within existing right-of-way, and Phase 2, add bike and pedestrian facilities on one side of Johns Road.
But the length of Johns Road, improvement of it from I-10 down to the creek or to School Street.
To School Street.
Do we have that anywhere here?
That's kind of the subcommittee, from Bitsy's subcommittee, that would be essentially just adding the turn lane.
And what, you said that Bitsy's is just adding the turn lane, right?
Adding the turn lane and then adding bike and pedestrian.
Right, and,
For the whole length.
and
Okay.
Ben is suggesting that we go in and do 3 lanes the whole length. Is there any other recommendation besides this one?
I don't believe so.
So we combine that with bike and pedestrian.
Yeah, so it sounds like that was already the recommendation of the committee, was 3 lanes the whole
subcommittee, right.
length. So you're saying the same thing that's already been made, yes.
Yeah.
If that was the recommendation of the subcommittee, can we just address that and just skip this one? Because this is basically saying a tiny piece of the whole, of the road.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yes, so what I'll do is I'll just use the subcommittee recommendation and then note that this one was an issue brought up on that road that will support that recommendation.
So you're comfortable what you need to do with it, right, Northern?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, no one has to write anything else on
All
this
right,
one.
very good.
No, I will just add one small comment. If for some reason planners are investigating this and it's infeasible to do the full length of the road, I do think it makes some sense to say, well, then do it here. This is where we're desperate. you know?
Okay, I think we have covered what we're going to cover for today on projects. Thank you all. Hopefully one more episode, one more effort, and we will get through. Next time, we'll hear from the subcommittee on eminent domain, from Mr. Van Wolf and his subcommittee, and then we will take on the rest of these projects.
Tim, are we going to need to gather again?
Well, I'll send out a revised, there weren't that many changes actually, so I'll just redline what we did, and then if folks feel like they want to reconvene to discuss, absolutely.
Okay, okay.
And that'll go out within the week.
Okay.
It'll give us a week to kind of fine tune it before next meeting here.
Got it. It might be. I have a feeling it will be, so.
Okay.
Second opportunity for public comment. Ms. Deaver, you're first on the list.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am sorry I haven't been able to attend the meetings in person, but my husband is going to have heart surgery on Friday.
Oh, good
So
luck.
we're trying to keep the germs down here at the household. On to my problem. I'm very anxious to hear from the city, from Jeff, if he has been able to put some type of policy statement together for the thoroughfare planning in the eminent domain. That was one of my main complaints when we went to the Bernie Mobility open house for the master plan. The master plan in the past has never addressed the fact that the thoroughfare does not speak with any of the property owners and consequently does not respect the boundaries of some existing housing neighborhoods. It also did not respect any historical property. They didn't even look for it. Johann Schertz Cemetery, which we had established during the Gateway, actually physically had it established, took it to TxDOT, told them it was there, and then received approval from the Historical Commission and got it marked. They just still didn't have it on their map for the Bernie Mobility Master Plan. So I believe that there is a lot of disconnect and dysfunction between what the city feels is a priority inside the ETJ and the city limits compared to this thoroughfare process that is the wild, wild west, literally, and how they're processing. They have a very excellent failure, if you want to look at it, right now that they're dealing with between Esperanza, the property that's being developed along 46, which I believe is 1650 and 1670 River Road, and Champion Heights. There's some property there that the thoroughfare plan goes through, and those nice people came to the P&Z, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and said, we're not selling it. So if you got your thoroughfare going through us, what are you going to do? And then there was another piece of property that I don't even think they talked to the actual owner that has storage units or something. So this is the failure of the thoroughfare plan. You can plan all you want, but if you aren't upfront about who you're talking to and where you're going, it's going to fail in the end. And then your plan is dead in the water. And we have that going on in the southeast quadrant, and you're going to have it going on in the northeast quadrant. So a little more common sense and adult talk in the room, as was pointed out by the mayor that he didn't think we had during the Gateway. Well, I don't think they're having it on the thoroughfare plan, and it needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deaver. Any closing comments? Lance Cowell.
Sorry to do this to you guys. Just a quick comment. Name's Lance Kyle, by the way. It's been suggested by a couple of committee members over the past year that the citizens are being intellectually inconsistent or contradictory when it comes to eminent domain and property rights. For example, the taking of a property for a quote-unquote public road, public purpose road, is a taking. But it's been suggested that people are also trying to take the property rights of their neighbors, i.e., developers, in redevelopment situations or development situations. That's not necessarily what they're doing. It's the secondhand smoke argument. They're trying to protect their property rights from a skyscraper, a nuclear power plant, an airport. It's not one-sided, it's two-sided. And, if you've got one guy smoking in a bar and there's 100 people that don't smoke, same with the neighborhood. One guy wants to build a skyscraper, but the 100 single-family homes are going to be negatively impacted with people looking out the windows into their backyard while they're skinny dipping, That's not good. Anyway, I just wanted to say that, I don't think the people are being inconsistent there on the property rights question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kyle. Committee members, anybody have any closing comments? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for being here today.
Well, I went to the doctor.